Morning, everybody. Morning. You guys all right? You had your coffee? I'm not offended if you get up and get more. And if I do it in the middle of the talk, just wait. I'll be back. Good to be here. Sorry I couldn't be here yesterday, and I know I missed many amazing speakers, and I hope that this weekend has been just beautiful for you so far. My name's Tim Gillespie. I'm the lead pastor of Crosswalk Church in Redlands and the teaching pastor for the Crosswalk network of churches that now extends, I should say, the Crosswalk global network of churches, because we've got one in Australia and we're launching in 2 weeks in Jakarta, Indonesia. Which, when I went out to Jakarta, I realized how American-centric my education was. Because, first of all, I don't really know where Indonesia is. It's somewhere way out there. But as we're landing, I didn't do any research, and I should have. As we're landing, the pilot gets on. He said, okay, we're going to be landing. It'll be about 30 minutes. We're now on the outskirts of Jakarta. I'm like, what are we just going to go like this? Jakarta is the second largest city in the world. And you probably knew that, but I did not. And it's a fascinating place. And the fact that the gospel is penetrating a mostly Muslim country, and these churches are being planted by people who are just desperate to hear the message that Jesus is all, full stop, is pretty phenomenal. And so, as Patty said, 14 years ago, we began this journey with the One Project. And for me, this journey has culminated in a continuing opportunity to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with so many people, and it's pretty amazing. Today I'm going to talk about three things. I'm going to talk about anchor points, I'm going to talk about waypoints, and I'm going to talk about beacons. And I don't usually telegraph what I'm going to talk about, but I think it makes sense in light of what we are speaking of in these particular texts. And so, a quick recap. Yesterday we talked about unity, and apparently I'm supposed to use a basketball metaphor, is what I understand. I didn't put that in. I apologize for that. I can make one up if you want, but I won't do that. Ephesians 4:14, you just heard it. Then we will no longer be immature like children. We won't be tossed and blown about by every wind of new teaching. And this sounds like a reference to sailors almost, and I'm not that. I can tell you the truth. I throw up when I'm on boats. But when I was younger, I used to try and windsurf. And windsurfing is really hard because you have to know how to surf and you have to know how to sail. I could do neither one of those, and so I would stand up, the wind would catch it, it would blow me out, and then I would just sit there until someone came and got me. That was pretty much the whole thing. But later on, I did become a surfer. And when you surf, you need an anchor point. Right? So you have to find a place on the shore that you can pinpoint to make sure that you don't get pushed too far north or too far south. And I used to, because now for some reason I'm over 50, and I used to go surfing quite often, and we go to this place called San Onofre, which is a pretty famous break. And if you get pushed too far north, what ends up happening is that you end up in the military base, and if you get out of the ocean at the military base, they arrest you. So you want to make sure you don't do that. Here's the problem at San Onofre, though. If you go too far south, is this right? Is this south here in Florida? I can't tell because your water's on the wrong side. And I know you're going to say there's water on either side, but that doesn't help me at all. Right? I know we're in the center of Florida somewhere. Anyway, if you go too far south at San Onofre, then you're right in front of the nuclear power plant, and your babies will have 3 heads. So you really want to stay within where you want to stay, pretty much, just like these green lines where I'm not supposed to go. Oh, I was told I can't go past this or the cameras can't get me, so. Sorry, man. Anyway, so you want to stay, and so you pick these anchor points, right? You pick, the shoulder of the nuclear power plant and the gate that they will arrest you if you go past. And so that's looking in from the ocean. You have those points, and that's great because those points don't really move, right? They pretty much stay at the same place. The problem is when you surf, you need to have anchor points that are also out in the water. You need to have anchor points that are looking out to the ocean. So if you've ever been to a beach, and you see a guy with a surfboard sitting on his car just looking very serious at the water, it's because they're looking for anchor points of where they can paddle out, and it will be the easiest for them to get out so they can begin to surf, right? Because they want to know where the waves are so that they don't get caught in a bad situation. When I was in the Marshall Islands, we were surfing at what we called the point, because there was a point there, and if you went too far, over, you would have to paddle through a hammerhead breeding ground. So that's what they told us. Just to be clear, I was there for a year. I never saw any hammerheads, and we dove right there. I don't know where they were, but think about that. Think about having to paddle about a quarter of a mile through what you think is a hammerhead breeding ground. If you didn't know Jesus before, you got really intimate with him and you're quoting like, I can do all things who strengthen me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I'm sure Jesus is up there like, that's not what that meant. But yeah, so you've got to have these, you've got to find these anchor points, right? You've got to find these places that don't move, that you can stay between. Because when you're at the mercy of the ocean, you must find the boundaries so you can orient yourself. It would be easier just to have an anchor rather than an anchor point. The problem is if you have an anchor, you don't go anywhere, right? You just stay in the same place, and that wouldn't be any fun. So you find anchor points to keep you aware of where you are. With the right anchor points, you won't stray far enough to get lost. Those anchor points have to be things, though, that cannot move and cannot be moved. When I finally got to be pretty decent at surfing, nobody had really explained this idea of anchor points to me, which, you kind of pick up along the way. But one time I was surfing, I can't remember where I was. I think I was surfing in North County, LA. And I picked an anchor point that was a flag, and it was great. And I took a couple waves, everything was good. And I looked up and I realized the anchor point's gone because somebody just put it in the ground. And while I was surfing, somebody picked it up and moved it. And all of a sudden, I was lost. So the truth is, people can't really be your anchor point because people move, people walk, they learn, they transform, they change, and sometimes they walk away. This means if we use someone else to be our anchor point, we might be in a world of trouble. It can't be a pastor, it can't be a priest, it can't be a prophet. And organizations cannot be your anchor point. I don't care the size, the purpose, the success, or the failure of the organization. They cannot be your anchor point. All it takes is one personnel change, one reorg, and you're lost at sea. The whole thing is up for grabs. But anchor points, it's a relatively small place when you look at anchor points and you're surfing. You're really not going that far. So you don't just need anchor points in your life to not just be blown away. You also need waypoints. So if you don't know what a waypoint is a specific geographical location used to define an area navigation route or the flight plan of an aircraft employing area navigation. I had to read that because I didn't know what they were. You pilots are like, we got it. But do you? Waypoints are identified as either flybys, and as I understand it, and again, if you are a pilot, I apologize for destroying this idea. But if you've got a waypoint and you want to do a flyby, let's say that guitar is a waypoint, I know that that's where I have to turn, but I also know that there's a lot of land, there's a lot of area that I can use to get on the path that I want to take. So I'm going to do a flyby. I'm not going to be right on top of it. It gives you a little more flexibility. It gives you a little more freedom, still going in the direction that you want, but you have those flyby waypoints. But you also have flyover waypoints. This is a waypoint at which the turn is initiated in order to join the next segment of a route or procedure. So basically, one flies around or fly by, or you fly right over. Now, these waypoints, here's the thing, they don't actually exist. They have crazy names, right? They put words together to make all these different names, and it's the way that you navigate, cross-continental areas. Like you use these waypoints to make big turns, to go big, long distances. And those waypoints, while you cannot see them because they are latitude and longitude, they keep us oriented in the right direction. We come close to them, we fly over them, we go around them, but they give us direction. And so you can live a little bit bigger with these waypoints that you've set in your life. And these waypoints aren't just physical things, but they're your values, your morals, what directs you in the decisions that you're making. and how you make those decisions. Ephesians 4:14 continues, we will not be influenced when people try to trick us with lies so clever they sound like the truth. When you have waypoints, you can navigate through truth like an experienced pilot. I was flying to Sydney, Australia, and we had the coolest experience. My daughter was with me. She was probably 14 at the time. And as we're flying, they gave this announcement. They said, listen, we want to celebrate our pilot today because this is his last flight. He's retiring. His whole family is there. And so he comes out and we all clap for him. And, my daughter drew him a little picture and gave it to him. I'm sure he's got it up on his wall now. But it was really exciting, right? Because we love experienced pilots. That's great. Have you noticed they never do that on the pilot's first flight? I mean, wouldn't that be awesome if they're like, hey, we want to celebrate Joe? This is his first time flying solo. Can you imagine the anxiety that would happen? They should do that that sounds like something Southwest would do just to mess with you a little bit, right? Those waypoints let you navigate through life like an experienced pilot. And even though the flight path is not a track, it gives you some flexibility and some freedom. That's a mature faith. A mature faith understands the anchor points and the waypoints of faith. What will never move, what we can navigate around and through. These are important as we interact with the idea of faith, as we understand doctrine, and even as we wrestle with what the church was, is supposed to be. Ephesians 4:14, instead, we will speak the truth in love. And I hate this text because no one does this, right? When someone comes up to me and says, Pastor, I just want to speak the truth in love, that means I hate what you did. But when you criticize a pastor, nobody criticizes just the things they say. Like, I'm fine with somebody coming up and being like, not your best. That's fine. I preach some horrible sermons, as evidenced this morning, right? That's fine. You can say that to me. But that's never the way truth and love is given, right? Let me speak truth and love. The devil is using you. I had someone said, did you make a deal with the devil? I'm like, it's a crappy deal if this is my life. Like, I don't know. I did not pay attention to the finer points of this contract. I just nobody speaks the truth and nobody even speaks the truth and like. That'd be nice. Like, nobody does that, right? So if they could just say, listen, I really like you. Maybe study more. Something like that. Speak the truth and like means that, you even like the person enough to pay attention. What does speak the truth and love even mean? It means that you care enough to intervene. Intervene when somebody has lost their anchor points. Intervene when somebody has navigated so far off their waypoints that they're not sure where to go anymore. It's not just course correction. That's what happens in our everyday interactions. To speak the truth in love is to say, I think you need rescuing. And if you do it really in love, it can be transformational. But it only happens positively when a mature faith steps into those spaces. And by the way, you have to earn the right to speak the truth in love. I had a guy come to me after church one day. We had this little easy up outside, and I was greeting people, and it happened to be after Christmas, or right around the Christmas season. And this guy comes up to me, and he's like, "You're the pastor?" I'm like, "Yeah, I was the guy standing up there for 30 minutes, so that seems like a weird question." But he's like, "You're the pastor?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm the pastor." He's like, "First time at your church?" I'm like, "Oh, great, welcome." He's like, "Yeah, I just live right down the road." I was like, "Well, that took you a while to find, but okay." And he goes, "You know why I like your church?" I'm like, "I have no idea. Why do you like my church?" He's like, "You don't have Christmas trees up." I'm like, "Oh." Immediately, I'm like, "Oh, truth and love." Which is funny because we did have Christmas trees up. They were just designed like triangles so he was not able to interpret cool design. So he's like, you don't have Christmas trees up. And he goes, you know that Christmas is a pagan holiday. And I was like, okay, here we go. And I said, I'm going to stop you right here. I said, first of all, this sounds like a you issue, not a me issue. That's something that you want to talk to me. And he's like, do you know? And I was like, I'm not even going to engage with you. And he goes, because there's churches who celebrate Christmas. And I'm like, bro, this. Oh. So I said, hey, man, I don't know you. So I'm not going to answer any of your questions. You don't know why we do what we do. You don't know what we like, what we don't like, why we're making the decisions. So here's the deal I'll make with you. I'll have this conversation with you next year. I said, but you have to stay here for a year. You have to engage in ministry. You have to find out what we're about. You have to attend 80% of the time. You do that, and you still have this question. Next year, you and I can have this conversation. And he goes, you expect me to come back here that many times? And in my head, I went, Lord, no. But my mouth said, we'd love to have you. Anchor points, waypoints, so that we might have a mature faith, might not get lost. And then the scripture says, growing in every way more and more like Christ, who is the head of his body, the church. And this is faith maturity, understanding the anchor points of your life, understanding the waypoints where you turn, where you shift. Growing to be like Christ, not offended, and trying not to offend. Truly speaking the truth in love, after you've earned the right, and in every aspect of your life. But there's one more thing when we're navigating through life that's really important, and it's that we need beacons. A beacon is a warning light, but its lesser used understanding is that it's a celebration light. When you are a traveler on the sea, or when you've been traveling over the sea, and you see those beacon lights, it is a celebration that you're coming home. These are beacon moments, finding your anchor points, navigating through your waypoints. Even speaking the truth in love and these are beacon moments. The influence that we have that goes beyond position and power and even profits. The beautiful thing about a beacon is that while it can be something other than you, it can be you. You can be the celebration light that brings people home. We need all three. But sometimes we need to be all three for people when we can. We need to be those things for the organizations that we work with and that we run. We need to lead, we need to help people grow, and we need to grow. Ephesians 4:16 finishes out like this. He makes the whole body fit together perfectly as each part does its own special work. It helps other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing. So one last point. Paul uses this body illustration again, and he's really good at it, right? He's used it many, many times. And the body is a really complex system that creates some sort of outcome. And there's two kinds of systems that we have to deal with in the world. There's a complicated system where if everything doesn't work, you don't get any sort of outcome. And then there's a complex system that if it doesn't work particularly the way you want it to, you will still get an outcome. And I was, a few years ago, I'd been preaching at my church, and I go back and I see one of my favorite people in the world who's no longer with us, Dr. Will Alexander. I met him when he was 79 years old. He worked until he was 93, I think. When I was sitting in a meeting with him, I was like, Will, why are you in this meeting? And he looked at me like, what? I said, yeah, why are you in this meeting? Aren't you retired? He's like, I've done my best work since I turned 70. I was like, oh, that gives me hope. So at this point, he's in his 90s. And, we did church like we do, and it's loud, and it's raucous, and there's lights and the whole thing. And he's just sitting in the back, just taking it all in. So when I finished preaching, I wanted to make sure I went and talked to him. So I sat down with him, and he was just glowing. His wife had died a few months before, so that was painful. He didn't have a lot longer to go. But he was just glowing seeing young people come back to church and seeing a vibrant expression of Jesus in the Seventh-day Adventist denomination. And it was just an honor to have him there, honestly. Same honor I felt with Bill Johnson as he was at our church as well. But Will said, and I love it when somebody who's been around says, because you're going to get something. Like you're going to get, and it's going to be good. And he said, the church is an organization. Oh, that's a mess. It's like, it's just horrible. Go on. Like, I didn't know if that's what he was going to leave me with, because that was going to be a little depressing. And he said, but the church as an organism, oh, that's a beautiful thing. It's the difference between what's complicated and what's complex. Our church is a complex system, so we will get an outcome. And if we're not very careful with how we manage this system, the outcome that we get is horrible: arrogance, ugliness, divisiveness, exclusion. But if we manage our little piece of this organism, we think about being anchor points for people and waypoints for people, and the waypoints and anchor points that we have. We think about the beacons that we need in our life that welcome us home and celebrate us home. When we think about our faith as a complicated or a complex system, we begin to realize this organism that we've been called to, it's up to us to make the outcome that we want to see happen. And here's the thing, speaking as a local church pastor, that's every week when you come to church. It's every moment when you interact with what we call this denomination and this group of people. It's the ownership that you take. Because what we can't do is we can't leave it to somebody else to decide how the system is going to work. You have just as much stake as anyone else who is deciding to be exclusive, to take us in a direction that is not healthy or helpful or is just hurtful. The people in this room, and I've seen this again and again, and over time, so I'll stop in just a moment, but the last 5 years has been a journey for me of people calling us up and saying, we can't go to any church close to us. One guy said, the last time I was in church, the pastor stood up and started calling out our sins. And I was like, was he accurate? I was just curious, but to be clear, he was not accurate. But that's worse maybe, I don't know. He's like, I will never bring my family back to that church. Can we start a church? I was like, yeah. I mean, that's how this whole thing kind of got started. Rick, you and I know. I get 2 or 3 calls a week from people who want to take ownership of the church that they belong to and want to grow that church. We're now at 8 campuses. We've got 4 in development. We're a local church. But it's because people are not going to give up the dream of an Adventism that becomes a beacon of light to the world. And they're not going to wait anymore for somebody else to do it, for the complicated system that we have to figure itself out. They decided they're going to be part of an organism that is growing organically and naturally and beginning to become salt and light, to become an anchor point in the community and a waypoint for weary travelers and become a beacon to welcome them home. And by the way, it takes a mature faith to plant a church. But it takes a mature faith to stay. Thank you.